Yom Yerushalayim is actually very complicated for people living today. I'm not sure how many of you know much about Yom Yerushalayim. Can I have a show of hands? How many people are you familiar with the concept of what Yom Yerushalayim is? Okay. Today in Yom Yerushalayim, it has become a very controversial day. And in certain sections and sectors of the Israeli public, it's a very special day. And in some sections, it's completely ignored. And that is very confusing. And therefore, the picture that you have on the screen is, right, what is Yom Yerushalayim? Some people are very excited about it, and some people are very ambivalent about it. But even more so, even if we're going to be excited about Yom Yerushalayim for what it represents, which is, I'll explain to you shortly, which is about when we gained the access to all of Yerushalayim in 1967, it's still bittersweet. Because even though we have access to Yerushalayim, and we have control of Yerushalayim, we still don't have the Beis Hamikdash. We still don't have the house of Hashem that we want to be at. And we still have the Dome of the Rock sitting on the place that is supposed to be the cherished. And therefore, it's a very sad day in the sense that we may have something great and we're very appreciative for what we have, but it also brings out the feelings of longing, of what we're lacking. And therefore, it's a very complex day. So my goal today is to be able to share with you what is Yom Yerushalayim. Okay, what's it about? Yeah, fancy new toy. What is Yom Yerushalayim? What's it about? What are we celebrating? I'm going to show you about a 10-minute clip of Rabbi Berkowitz speaking. I'll explain to you why I picked him. We're going to focus a little bit about, on the beginning, what is it about? What is Yom Yerushalayim? What are we celebrating? What's the excitement? And then, what does it mean to us today? So that took place almost 60 years ago. So what does Yom Yerushalayim mean to us today? In addition to that, we're going to go back. So we got Yerushalayim. What is Yerushalayim? Why is Yerushalayim so significant? Why are we so excited about it? Why did it become the center of our culture? So we're going to go back into Tanakh and all the way to the beginning of Bereshis. I'm going to have to teach you a little Kabbalah, but not too much, to be able to understand that. And then concluding with, what can I do about it? What does that mean to me? Right? Very practical to us, 2025. We finished the year of seminary. What do I walk away with from Yom Yerushalayim? Okay, so that's the agenda of what we're going to do. The first thing, like I said, I'm going to first start off with a clip. It's about 10 minutes long. It's a clip of Rabbi Yitzchak Berkowitz speaking. He was speaking about 4 years ago. He is the Rosh Hashiva Eish, so he's speaking to the guys at Eish. And you will see that there are many clippings. I kept clipping it because he was speaking and then he paused dramatically a lot. And I just thought that was a little bit harder to hear. So majority of the splices are just taking out the pauses. And then I jumped in a little bit in the end to get to the point that I thought that's most important. I also could not resist but to put in a couple of visualizations along the way. So that's mine. Any visualizations are mine. I basically took that from a documentary on the 6-Day War. Okay? So it's about 10 minutes, but it should hopefully be very educational, as well as being able to bring out the feelings of the day. I could tell you now similar information, but I wasn't alive. I was born in 1969. 1967 is when it took place. Rabbi Berkowitz, while he was in America at the time, was experiencing it from America very emotionally. There was a lot going on. They were very concerned about it, as he will describe. So I think it brings out a little bit more of a first-hand experience of what you can then feel, much more than I could give over to you. So I thought it was worthwhile, and I hope you'll find it, like I said, educational.
I was in high school, and I remember the weeks before the war broke out. Everyone knew the Arab armies were about to attack. Israel was so outnumbered, not just in terms of the size of the army, in terms of ammunition. The Arabs were getting the support of Russia, and all the friends of Israel declared neutrality. The Arab propaganda machine was talking about driving Israel into the sea. And for the most part, The strategists were predicting a good part of the population of Israel as not surviving. The Arab plan was to bomb the cities. It didn't look good. Didn't sound good. There was talk of preparing mass burial sites. I remember we were saying Tehillim nonstop. That was really scary. There was a real feeling that the future of the Yishuv in Israel was up in the balance there. And while they gave us all kinds of shmuzin about bitachon, when they give you shmuzin about bitachon, you know you're in trouble. Then came the war. That wasn't simple either. I don't know what happened. I guess it was hashkacha. All of the overseas broadcasting from Israel, for some reason, was out. It was always the impartial radio station. Those days radio was in. It was WINS, still around. INS still exists. No one knows who listens to the radio anyway. INS was out of commission during the first 2 days of the war for sure. All the radio stations were broadcasting the news, the press releases from the Arab countries. From Syria they got that Haifa was burning. They had hit all the refineries. Haifa was in flames. This is what we got. The Arab armies were advancing. It was bad. It was really, really bad. The Manhigim in America, remember Moshe Feinstein then, they declared a half-day fast, and everyone should fast. Young and old. This is during the war. We had no idea what was going on. Then finally, we started getting reports. And it turned out, and then that was reinforced by the Arab ambassador speaking at the UN, that Israel actually made the first move and had completely knocked out the Egyptian and Syrian Air Force. We did not know at the time, but the hashkacha was unbelievable. The Egyptian radar was turned off. They're building up to a war. Their radar was turned off. There was some secret meeting of all the heads of the Egyptian forces, so they turned off the radar. In Syria, I believe they went beneath the radar. But in Egypt, the radar was turned off. All of the planes were just destroyed in the airports, or the air bases.
Morning. Within an hour, Israeli jets knock out almost all Egyptian air bases, sever communications cables between the Sinai and Egyptian Army HQ, kill over a third of Egypt's pilots, and destroy the majority of Egyptian combat aircraft. Egyptian pilot Hashim Mustafa remembers the scene. Some 30 seconds from the end of the attack, a second wave of planes arrived. We ran about in the desert looking for cover. It was a sad comedy. Pilots of the newest and best equipped jets fighting with handguns. A ratio of losses 100% for us, 0% for them.
Then came the Jordanian front. There was a real fear. First of all, Jordan was really next door to Israel, to the center of the country, to Yerushalayim. There was a real threat to the civilian population, a direct threat. At the same time, having seen what happened to Egypt and Syria, Israel thought that the Jordanians would be open to hearing, don't bother us, we won't bother you. And a message was sent, right? It was declared openly. Declared openly. Don't join the war. Hashkacha had it that the Jordanians decided to join the war. All the strategists said that at that point it made no sense whatsoever. Well, Hashem thought otherwise. I came to Yerushalayim in the 70s. I came to study at the Mir. When you looked at the building, you saw that there were different colored stones. There was an Israeli army outpost on the roof of the building. The Jordanians were shelling the building. There were no bomb shelters in those days. The dining room of the Mir served as the bomb shelter for the whole neighborhood. The building was hit by 3 shells. The dorm room that years later I slept in had new stones in it because the old stones were hit. We heard from the people that were there at the time. The building shook. Shells landed all over the neighborhood. But it didn't last all that long. The army advanced. There was the fighting in Ammunition Hill, Givat Tachmoshet, which is almost hand-to-hand fighting. There were many casualties. The Jordanians were well dug in. Exactly why they didn't call in the Air Force, I don't know. Because it was really hand-to-hand fighting and a lot of people were killed. But they wiped out the Jordanian legions there. Advanced all the way to Rockefeller Museum. So the army got there. Stayed there overnight. The next day they proceeded. They took the old city. And then went on. Just kept going.
King Hussein himself sees the aftermath of these strikes. I will never forget the hallucinating sight of that defeat. Roads clogged with all kinds of vehicles, twisted, disemboweled, dented, still smoking, giving off that particular smell of metal and paint burnt by exploding bombs. In the midst of this charnel house were men, wounded, exhausted. They were trying to clear a path under the monstrous coup de grace being dealt to them by a horde of Israeli mirages screaming in a cloudless blue sky seared with the sun.
The whole Jewish nation was in disbelief. It's hard, it's very, very hard to try to recreate an atmosphere. For weeks, people really feared the destruction of the entire Yishuv in Eretz Yisrael. And everything's turned over. We didn't just survive. The day the Yishuv in Yerushalayim was saved was Chav Ches Iyar. To the Yerushalmis, it was a special day anyway. It was the yard site of Shmuel HaNavi, who's Nebi Samuel, the kever Shmuel HaNavi. You can pretty much see from most of Yerushalayim. That was the day the Yishuv in Yerushalayim was saved. In halacha, you don't have to be some creative machadesh to come up with reason to say halal. The Yishuv was saved. For the people that were here, their descendants, and anyone who joins the city. In halacha, the pashta should be, if you live in Yerushalayim, you have a chiyuv to say halal. The truth is, on the first Yom Yerushalayim, as they called it, from what I understand, many Yerushalmis said halal. Today, it's a matter of controversy. There emerged a very clear political right and a very, very clear political left. The left in those days was finding some kind of solution and giving the Arabs self-rule. The right was Israeli sovereignty over all of the lands that we captured, which, by the way, for the first time since the first time since the establishment of the state, there were actually defensible borders. If you remember the old map of Israel, it was like someone took a big bite out of the middle of it. And it was not defensible. It was just not defensible. I actually live on what was the border. In fact, when we first moved to the neighborhood, our building was the last that had electricity that was being supplied by the Israeli Chevrat Chashmal. And right across from us, it was the East Jerusalem Electric Company that eventually went bankrupt, so the Israelis took over. But basically it became the right and the left. It became political. What was named Yom Yerushalayim became the festival of the right. Yom Yerushalayim became a political holiday. The yeshiva world moved away from it. You're going to ask me, how does that determine halacha? We have such precedents. For anyone that lived through it here, and even in Chutz La'aretz, I guess there's no official celebration. But anyone who has any seichel and a bit of a heart takes the opportunity to thank Hashem for everything He did for us. First and foremost, that He saved the Yishuv miraculously. And second, we're here. Jews did not have access. Not talking about living, even coming to visit. The Kotel, the Arabs used to dump their garbage there. They built an Arab cemetery around Kever Rachel. They turned the Maras HaMachpelah into a mosque. They destroyed Kfarim of Doli Yisrael all over Har HaZeisim. Now, Mashiach isn't here. We're still on the wrong side of the Kotel. But we're certainly fortunate for where we are. Any way you choose to thank Hashem for it, you want to say Hallel? You have halacha on your side. You're in Yerushalayim now. You want to use your own words? Do that. But since you're not part of this question of right or left politically, although everyone's views are quite clear, you're not Israeli citizens. You don't have to worry so much. There's no reason you should not be marking this day in a big way.
So I hope that came across, that the emotion that came across. He experienced it perhaps from overseas, but it was a much more first-hand experience, and it was a very meaningful experience. And you see, he's still very emotional today that if everyone who benefits living in Yerushalayim or in seminary or in Yeshiva in Yerushalayim should be very grateful for what took place, because we're only here today because what took place then. Whether you say halal or not, that's a whole controversy thing, which is what he was coming to say. But that it should be a day that we appreciate and give thanks to Hashem, that should be very strong in anyone's heart. Unfortunately, like he said, it's become political. And therefore, when we come into the scene, we're not aware of all of that. We're very much more exposed to this conflict. And therefore, it makes it complicated, right? But this is what he said. In short, the audio was a little grainy. I'm not sure if everyone was able to hear it clearly. But in short, before the Six-Day War, Israel looked like this, right? That was Yerushalayim. There was no way to defend it, right? It was a crazy way it was set up. The Arabs could get in any direction, right? And after the war, in that very miraculous occasion that he described, and all of those occurrences, they had now defendable borders, and Yerushalayim was now in the middle and not on the edge. So Yerushalayim now became safe, and that's how we're here today. Furthermore, we have the Kaisel. We're able to visit the Kaisel. And that's something that we shouldn't take for granted, access to the closest we can get, right, to the Beis Hamikdash. And therefore, the Hakaras HaTov we should have was his emphasis. We should all have Hakaras HaTov one way or another, and we find the ways that we want to express it. But then he described that unfortunately, it was mired and broken, that feeling, because of this conflict. Right? Should we say it? Should we not say it? Politically right, politically left. And that's a tragedy unto itself, that we can't express our Hakaras HaTov without it having political ramifications. And therefore, I'm supposed to be doing one thing or another. So that's hard. But the truth is, if it has replayed, this scenario has replayed itself this very year. As we know that we had the horrible occurrence of October 7th, and all the Jews came together. Right? Everyone had this tremendous gathering and supporting each other, and whether it was the army or whether it was the people who were doing chesed or the people who were getting tzitzis or tefillin, right? There was such a wave of achdus that came together in response. But over the past year and a half, again, this unity that we had, it's cute, right? Became, I don't want it to be too intense, right? And now we have again this divisiveness, right? We have all of these fighting between one person and another. So hopefully by the end of this class, we'll have some direction how to go with that rift that has been created. Let's go to the next stage. What is Yerushalayim? Okay, that's the history. We now told you the history. You have a little bit of an inkling of what happened during the Six-Day War. Hopefully, it wasn't the first time you heard that, but if it is, hopefully it was clear enough that you can get a sense of what we have to be celebrating on this day. But let's go back and look at what is Yerushalayim. So for here, I'm going to follow David HaMelech. If I could ask you to take papers and hand it back. This is Kapitel Kuf Chav Beis in Tehillim. And this is the Shir Malas that David HaMelech is talking about, yearning for Yerushalayim. So what we're going to do here is we're going to see that what we're experiencing today is an echo or a similar theme of what was experienced all the way from the days of David HaMelech. Do you have it over on that last end that you need to get? Can you hand this now? Okay? But what is the importance of Yerushalayim? Clearly, Yerushalayim is very important to us today because we talk about it all the time. It's one of the brachas of Shemon Esrei. Right? We don't talk about Eretz Yisrael. We talk about Kibbutz Galuyos, that we should be gathered. We talk about being Machzir Shchinosei L'Tzion. We don't talk about Eretz Yisrael as a whole, but we do talk about Yerushalayim. Yerushalayim Yircha Toshav, it's a whole bracha. In benching, we have the third bracha of benching is about, again, Yerushalayim. It includes the Beis Hamikdash there also, but again, it's called Uvnei Yerushalayim. Right? And we talk about it every simcha. We break the glass under the chuppah. So what's Yerushalayim? Let's try and understand a little bit deeper, right? Let's go beyond modern history, beyond 1967, even beyond before the creation of the state. Let's go all the way back. What's Yerushalayim? Why is it so important? Why is it so central to us as a nation and us as humanity? So, if we look at Kapitel Kuf Chav Beis, where it starts off, Samachti b'mli Beis Hashem Nelech, David Melech rejoices at the fact that people want the Beis Hamikdash. And he talks about Omdus Hoyu Ragleinu B'Yerushalayim, that as the nation comes and gathers in Yerushalayim, we become an Ir Shechub L'Yachdu, we become unified. It becomes the focus of the people. Yerushalayim, not the Beis Hashem. Yerushalayim becomes the focus of the people. We'll explain why in this very kapitel. And then he explains that what was in Yerushalayim that was so important. First is Kisham L'Shivtei Kol. Where do they have it there? The central was L'Hoidas L'Shem Hashem. That is the Beis Hamikdash. Right? Beis Hamikdash was only Yerushalayim. But besides the Beis Hamikdash, he now goes into say Kisham Yoshu Kisleis L'Mishpat. That is where the Sanhedrin was. That was where the courts were. And that is where Kisus LeBeis David. That's where the government was. So as far as a nation goes, this was a place of centrality. The Malbim, in his Pirush on this kapitel, says a very beautiful analogy. He says we could compare Yerushalayim, we can compare the nation of Klal Yisrael to a person. And all of the Shvatim are the separate limbs that exist, that are part of this person. The heart and the brain of the person is Yerushalayim. The neshama is the Beis Hamikdash. So that if we want to be a complete person, we of course have to have a heart and we have to have a brain. And if we want to be able to access our neshama, then we also be able to have the Beis Hamikdash. But that is what Yerushalayim is like. And if we're missing Yerushalayim, we're like limbs without a core, without the brain, without the heart. And therefore, we can understand now as a nation, if we don't have Yerushalayim, we're missing integral pieces of ourselves. So let's go back before the Beis Hamikdash to answer Yonah's question. What's about Yerushalayim even before the Beis Hamikdash? Is it only because Hashem chose the Beis Hamikdash? I think I paid Yonah beforehand to ask that question right here. Perfect. What was it about Yerushalayim before that? So let's go before that. Where's the first place we begin to see Yerushalayim mentioned? It is actually divided into two parts. One part was where Avram brought Yitzchak up as an Akedah. And that's what it says, Vika Avram el Shem Amoka Mahu. Right after the Akedah, Avram calls that place Hashem Yireh. That Hashem will see. Hashem will look down upon that place, and that's where Hashem gazes and will remember the Akedah for all future generations. And therefore it continued to be known to this day, and to this day, Hashem will look, will gaze upon Yerushalayim, will gaze upon this area. The second part of the city was called Sholem. As we know later on, that Avram had to fight with the kings, in that famous story, and then afterwards you had Melchizedek, who was the Melech of Sholem, came out to greet him. Who was Melchizedek? He was Shem, ben Noach, the son of Noach Shem, who had lived all that time and continued to teach. He created a yeshiva, and he established it in the city of Sholem, which is the second half of what we have today as Yerushalayim. And therefore there was really two places. You had Hashem Yeruah, and therefore if you take the words Yeruah, and you take the aleph and the hey, you could put them together, you get a vav, right? 5. The gematria of aleph is 1. The gematria of hey is 5. 1 plus 5 is 6, and therefore that's a vav. So that's Yeru. That's you get the Yeru and Sholem, because that was the city that had been established right next to that area was the city of Sholem. You put them together, right? You get Yerushalayim. The first place in Tanakh we find the word Yerushalayim mentioned as a whole city is in the Sefer of Yeshua. Apparently, at that point in time, it had already been put together, those two halves, and they therefore referred to it as Yerushalayim. Okay? You do have one question, which we'll get to later, right? And that is, how do you get from Yerushalayim to Yerushalayim, right? Where does that ending change? We'll talk about that in a minute. But before we get there, let's go forwards. Let's still talk about the history of what that represented. What was so important about that place? So now we have the Akedah, right? That was one thing that took place before the Beis Hamikdash. But furthermore, if we go back in history, it's the place where Adam Rishon was created. When Hashem wanted to create Adam, it said he gathered the dust min Adama, right? Vayetza Hashem Elokim es Adam offer min Adama, took him dirt from the ground, and he blew into him his neshama. Rashi brings two explanations. The second explanation, Davar Acher, is not till offering mimakim shenemar mizbeach Adama Tosel. He took the dirt from the place of where the mizbeach was going to be established, and he used that dirt to create Adam. Because Adam will sin. Adam is made up of an animal nefesh as well as a godly nefesh, and therefore he will end up sinning. He'll need to be gain atonement, and therefore from his very source is where the mizbeach would be. So we see again the place of Yeru, the place of the Beis Hamikdash was already important and significant because that is from where we come. Right? All of us originate from Adam, and therefore where we come from is Adam. And Adam came from that dirt that was where the Mizbeach was in the time of the Beis Hamikdash. It's even more significant. And that is, if we go back to the days of creation, okay, even before Adam was created on the day 6, but even before that, in day -1, right? Before Hashem created the world, Hashem needed to create a space that would start creation. Now here, unfortunately, I do need to teach you a little Kabbalah, and hopefully Mrs. Levy won't tell on me that I'm doing a little bit of Kabbalah. Okay. If we take this concept that spirituality has no physicality, right? Spiritual has no limitations and no definitions as far as space. If I have two things that are separate, let's say I have midas adin and midas achesed, they are separate things, so they're referred to as distant. They're distant from each other. They're far from each other. And in the world of spirituality, there's no way to bring them together because they're opposites and therefore they're far. And there's no concept of bringing them close because there's no physical space. So in order to bring those midas together, Hashem had to create first a place of a physical place and imbue it then with those midas. That place that Hashem created, that first physical place, was the Even Shasiyah, that first original stone. On that stone is where the Aron Kodesh stood. It is the first place, the first physical place that creation started, and from there Hashem continued to make it. And therefore the word Bereshis is bara shis. He created the shis, the Even HaShasiyah. That was the first step of creation. So now, okay, Yerushalayim has obviously significance, right? Forget that's not just a coincidence. That's where he created man, right? It's not just where where Avram did the Akedah. It was the beginning of creation, and therefore it's the center of all spirituality. It's the gateway to the spiritual realm. It's the place where we dive into in order to be able to access Hashem on a spiritual level. So you ready? This is cool. Ready? This is cool. Ready? Yerushalayim. How to go back to that question? How does Yerushalayim become Yerushalayim? So, as everybody in Hebrew knows, if I have one hand, it's yad. 2 hands is? One regel is regel. 2 is? 1 eye is ayin. 2 is? Right? You end the patach yud mem is the conclusion when you have 2. So Yerushalayim really represents How do you get to Yerushalayim? So I missed my graphic. How do you get to Yerushalayim? Is because if you take Yerushalayim and Yerushalayim, two Yerushalayims together, and you put them together, you get Yerushalayim. Because opposite the Yerushalayim Shalmata, just like there is a Yerushalayim that we have in this world, there's Yerushalayim in Shemayim, where Hashem began to gather all of those forces to be able to connect them. And therefore you have two Yerushalayim, one opposite the other. That picture is not mine, it's not AI, it's some artist, okay? I didn't have to make it up. But that's the idea. So Yerushalayim is two cities, right? Two cities of Yerushalayim, because it is the portal, it is the connection between this world and the next world. So what's an interesting thing is that just like when Hashem needed to create the world, he first needed to bring a physical place to it, and then he connected that physical place back to the spiritual Yerushalayim. Now, in order to destroy Yerushalayim, it can't be destroyed, the physical place, because it has this spiritual protection surrounding it. In order to destroy Yerushalayim, we first need to destroy the spiritual Yerushalayim. And the good news and the bad news is that the only people that can destroy the spiritual Yerushalayim are the chosen people. It's only because we did Aveirus, whether it was the big three, or whether it was Sinas Chinam, we destroyed that spiritual Yerushalayim, which allowed the enemies then to come in and destroy the physical Yerushalayim. So now, we've accomplished 3 out of the 4 parts, right? We spoke about what is about Yom Yerushalayim today, and we understand it's about appreciating Hashem giving us back this place of Yerushalayim. We spoke about the conflicts that we still have today in regards to Yerushalayim that make it a little bit hard for us to really relate to it and connect to it directly. And we understand the significance of Yerushalayim, though, is because it's from the very beginning of creation. And how much more tragic is it that we can't celebrate that Hashem gave it back in our hands? Now, yes, admittedly, we need to be very sad that he only gave us back access to the Kosel. And we're still lacking the Beis Hamikdash, and we're still lacking everything that's the Beis Hashem, and therefore it should make us want to yearn more. The confusion makes us have a hard time connecting to it. Which brings us to our last question of what can I do? So, that's a hard question. And Baruch Hashem, I don't have to think of the answer myself, because David HaMelech already continues to do so in this very kapitel. David HaMelech says, so what are you going to do? Shalom Yerushalayim. Ask, well, how is the peace in Yerushalayim? Yishalu Avayich. If you want to know how to bring peace back to Yerushalayim, you're going to have to ask the people that live in there, Ohavayich, the beloved ones. And if you're able to have Shalom, as you see, Yi Shalom Bechelech, the next pasuk, I'll blow it up for us, okay? Shalom Yerushalayim, ask Shalom Yerushalayim, ask the peace of Yerushalayim. Who do you have to ask? You have to ask us, its residents. And you have to ask, Yi Shalom Bechelech, if there is peace amongst you, and your soldiers, meaning the people that live outside Yerushalayim, your Shvatim, all of the communities that we have in the Jewish people. If there is peace on the outside, then Shalva B'Amanusayich, there will be inner peace of Yerushalayim as well. The Malbim is medayik between Shalom and Shalva. Shalom means on the outside, something you can see. Shalva is an inner peace. So if there is peace, if there's Shalom on the outside, amongst all the different factions of Klal Yisrael, then there can be Shalva, there can be inner peace inside the Beis Hamikdash as well, inside our citadels. And therefore he says, Laman lachai v're'ai, if I want to tell you how we can make peace, my friends and my beloved ones, it's going to have to be Adabra no Shalom Bach. I can speak to you. Dabra is something that is spoken, is visual. You're able to hear it. It's clear. It's obvious. You need to have Shalom. Again, that lashon of Shalom. What do you need to do? You need to make Shalom amongst yourselves. But Laman Beis Hashem, if you want to know how to bring back the Beis Hamikdash and bring back the Shechina, you also have to go and dig for it. A vakshalach is a lashon of searching. And you have to go inside and check your midos, check your mitzvahs, check your Torah, and connect that back to Hashem. So there's a two-pronged agenda. If we want to bring back Yerushalayim to where it's supposed to be, is first we have to find a way to make peace with the people around us. No tall order on that one, right? But that's what we need to work to. We don't have to finish the whole thing, but we need to make steps. We don't have to make all the peace, but we need to find ways to connect and not to be judgmental and not to categorize and not to belittle and not to defame other people of Klal Yisrael. And we need to work on our Torah mitzvahs. We need to work on our connection to Hashem. And through those double-pronged approach is how we hope to be able to bring Yerushalayim back into its full glory. With the Beis Hashem, with the Beis Hamikdash, and that we were able to once again serve Hashem in all of the ways that Yerushalayim is meant to be, with us as a people, with the people now as a body, as we go back to the Malbim as a Mashal, right? We'll be a body with a brain and a beating heart and a soul that's connected to Avinu Shebashamayim. That's it.